In the deepest shadows of human history, a persistent whisper echoes through time. It is a story told in countless tongues, etched onto ancient stone, and woven into the very fabric of our oldest civilizations. This is the story of giants. These are not merely tall individuals, but beings of immense stature and power, figures who walked the earth long before our modern world took shape. From the sun-scorched deserts of the ancient Near East to the frozen fjords of Scandinavia, and across the vast oceans to the Americas, the tale remains remarkably consistent. They were builders, they were warriors, they were kings, and sometimes they were gods. Their presence is a fundamental part of our collective memory, a shared dream from a forgotten age that refuses to fade. These accounts are far too widespread to be dismissed as simple coincidence. They are a universal constant in the variable equation of human culture. Why did so many separate ancient societies, with no known contact, all independently conceive of a world once inhabited by towering humanoids? The Greeks spoke of the Titans, the primordial deities who ruled before the Olympians. The Norse sagas are filled with the deeds of the Jötnar, the frost giants of Jotunheimr. The sacred texts of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all reference colossal beings who interacted with humankind in the distant past. These are not just fleeting mentions. They are foundational narratives that explain the origins of the world, the lineage of heroes, and the cataclysmic battles that shaped reality itself. The consistency of these legends is staggering. They don't just describe large people, they detail beings whose size defied the natural order, beings capable of moving mountains, redirecting rivers, and challenging the heavens. In many traditions, these giants were the Earth's first inhabitants, a primordial race that held dominion over a wild and untamed world. Their stories are often intertwined with creation itself, suggesting they are as old as the mountains and rivers they were said to command. This shared theme poses a profound question. Are we looking at a simple archetype, a psychological necessity for early humans to explain the grand and terrifying forces of nature? Or are these fragmented memories of something real, a historical echo that has been distorted and mythologized over millennia? The sheer volume of these tales compels us to look closer. It forces us to move beyond the comfortable explanation of simple folklore. When one culture tells of giants, it is a myth. When two cultures do, it is a coincidence. But when nearly every culture across the globe shares a version of the same fundamental story, it begins to look less like fiction and more like a piece of a much larger, undiscovered puzzle. The legends are the first clue, the ancient breadcrumbs leading us down a path of inquiry that has been traveled by mystics, scholars, and adventurers for centuries. They beckon us to ask a question that has been deemed taboo by mainstream history. What if the stories were true? The legends of giants do not exist solely in the ethereal realm of myth and oral tradition. They are anchored to the physical world through tangible places and enigmatic artifacts that continue to baffle researchers to this day. Across the globe, colossal structures stand as silent testaments to an unknown age, built with a precision and scale that seems to defy the capabilities of their supposed creators. Places like Baalbek in Lebanon feature foundation stones weighing over 800 tons, quarried and moved with an engineering prowess that remains a mystery. In Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuaman is constructed from massive, irregularly shaped boulders, fitted together so perfectly that not even a sheet of paper can slide between them. Ancient legends from these regions attribute such feats not to ordinary humans, but to a race of giants. These megalithic wonders are often directly linked to the giant lore of their respective lands. Local traditions passed down through generations insist that only beings of immense size and strength could have possibly erected them. Skeptics argue for ingenious, yet conventional human methods involving levers, rollers, and immense manpower. Yet, the sheer scale of some of these projects pushes the limits of that explanation. The effort required would have been monumental, demanding a level of social organization and technical skill that seems anachronistic for the periods in which they were supposedly built. It is this apparent contradiction, this gap between attributed capability and observable result, that keeps the legends of giant builders alive and well. Beyond architecture, the stories point to physical remains. Throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, newspapers across North America were filled with sensational reports of the discovery of enormous skeletons. These accounts often described remains ranging from 7 to over 10 feet in height, unearthed from ancient burial mounds and caves. Many of these stories told of skeletons with unusual features, such as double rows of teeth or skulls of extraordinary thickness. Tales of the red-haired giants of Nevada, found in Lovelock Cave, became a cornerstone of this modern giant mythology. While many of these newspaper reports were likely exaggerated or outright hoaxes, the sheer number and consistency of the claims created a powerful narrative. This narrative suggested that proof of the giants was not just in myth, but buried right beneath our feet. It fueled a belief that a hidden history was being actively suppressed, a history that would rewrite everything we thought we knew about the origins of humanity on the American continent and beyond. The accounts described artifacts buried with these skeletons, tools, weapons, and ornaments of a size seemingly unfit for ordinary humans. Whether fact or folklore, these discoveries ignited the public imagination and transformed the search for giants from a literary pursuit into a tangible archaeological quest. The stories were no longer just stories. They were now accompanied by claims of physical evidence, waiting to be verified. If we entertain the possibility, even for a moment, that a race of giants once walked the earth, we are immediately confronted with an even greater mystery than their existence. If they were so powerful, so widespread, and so dominant, where did they all go? A species does not simply vanish. An entire population of colossal beings, present on every continent, cannot just disappear without leaving a single, undisputed trace. This is the central paradox of the giant phenomenon. The evidence for their existence is circumstantial and folkloric, while the evidence for their extinction is quite simply everywhere. We live in a world devoid of them, and our fossil record, as presented by mainstream science, contains no definitive proof of their past dominion. The silence from the scientific community on this matter is deafening, and for good reason. Biology and physics present formidable barriers to the existence of true giants. The square cube law dictates that as an organism's height doubles, its surface area quadruples, but its volume and mass increase by a factor of 8. A 15-foot human would not just be a scaled-up version of ourselves. They would need bones of impossible density and a heart of monstrous proportions just to stand and pump blood against gravity. The biological strain would be immense, leading to a host of debilitating health issues. Modern human gigantism, a medical condition, offers a grim preview. Individuals who grow past 8 feet tall rarely live long, healthy lives. This biological reality forces us to consider that if they existed, they must have been fundamentally different from us, or our understanding of biology is incomplete. Yet, their disappearance remains the core enigma. Civilizations fall, but their people, their DNA, and their artifacts persist. Species go extinct, but they leave behind a fossil record. For the giants, however, the trail goes cold. The myths that speak so vividly of their lives are often just as vivid about their demise. Many tales end in a cataclysmic war between the giants and a new race of gods or men. Others, like the biblical account of the Nephilim, conclude with a great, world-altering flood that wiped the slate clean. This brings us to the ultimate question that drives this entire investigation. Did they die out in a global catastrophe that erased most of their remains from the geological record? Were they hunted to extinction by our smaller, but perhaps more numerous and adaptable ancestors? Or is there a more unsettling possibility? Was their history deliberately erased? This is where the narrative splinters into 1,000 different theories, from the scientific to the conspiratorial. The absence of evidence becomes, for some, evidence of a cover-up. For others, it is proof that the giants were never anything more than a powerful metaphor. The question remains, stark and unanswered. Where did the giants really go? Our journey begins here, today, on May 24th, 2024, as we embark on a quest to navigate this labyrinth of myth, science, and mystery. The goal is not to blindly accept ancient legends, nor is it to summarily dismiss them based on modern assumptions. Instead, our purpose is to investigate the clues, to weigh the evidence, and to explore the many branching paths of this incredible story. We will venture back to the beginning, examining the oldest accounts from cultures that shaped our world. We will scrutinize the sacred texts, the epic poems, and the oral traditions that first gave voice to the idea of a world shared with giants. This is a search for the source code of the legend. We must also step into the shoes of the 19th century explorers and archaeologists, a time when the world seemed full of undiscovered wonders, and the line between history and myth was not so rigidly drawn. We will investigate the newspaper clippings, the field reports, and the controversial claims of giant skeleton discoveries. This part of the investigation requires a critical eye, for it is a domain rife with hoaxes and exaggerations. We must attempt to separate credible accounts from tall tales, all while exploring the persistent conspiracy theories that claim a deliberate and systematic effort was made to hide these discoveries from the public eye, most notably by esteemed institutions like the Smithsonian. Then, we will turn to the cold, hard lens of modern science. What do the laws of physics and biology truly tell us about the feasibility of giant humanoids? We will explore the square cube law, the limits of bone density, and the medical realities of gigantism. By understanding the immense challenges a giant's body would face, we can better appreciate what it would have taken for such beings to exist. This scientific grounding is essential. It provides the framework against which all other claims must be measured. It serves as our anchor in reality as we navigate the more speculative and fantastic aspects of the mystery. Finally, we must be open to the possibility that the answer is not a simple yes or no. Perhaps the truth is more nuanced, more symbolic. Could the giants of legend have been a metaphor for something else entirely? Powerful rulers, a forgotten technology, or even a spiritual concept? We will explore the psychological and symbolic interpretations, considering that these stories may reveal more about the human psyche than they do about human history. This investigation is a journey into the unknown, a deep dive into one of humanity's oldest and most enduring questions. The path is uncertain, but the destination is truth in whatever form it may take. In the opening chapters of the Bible, we encounter one of the oldest and most compelling accounts of giants, the Nephilim. The book of Genesis, revered by billions, presents a brief but tantalizing reference. There were giants in the earth in those days. This phrase alone has sparked centuries of debate and imagination. The context is mysterious, hinting at a time when the boundaries between the divine and mortal realms were blurred, when extraordinary beings, sons of God, interacted with the daughters of men. The result, according to Scripture, was a race of mighty men, renowned for their strength and deeds. The Hebrew word Nephilim remains a source of intrigue. Some translate it as fallen ones, while others simply call them giants. Their presence is associated with an age of chaos and violence, a world so corrupted that it would soon be swept away by the Great Flood. The Nephilim are portrayed not as mere tall men, but as beings of immense power and reputation, filling the earth with fear and awe. They straddle the line between legend and history, between the natural and the supernatural. Beyond Genesis, the Nephilim reappear in later biblical texts, including the Book of Numbers. Here, Israelite spies describe the land of Canaan as inhabited by descendants of giants, so large that they felt like grasshoppers in comparison. This evokes a sense of otherness, of creatures fundamentally alien to our experience. The biblical narrative does not dwell on their origins or fate, but their very mention plants a seed of mystery that will echo through the centuries. The enduring fascination with the Nephilim stems from this ambiguity. Are they a metaphor for ancient tyrants, a memory of unusually tall tribes, or something far stranger? The Bible does not answer, leaving us with a tantalizing fragment, a puzzle piece that has inspired countless interpretations, from literalist readings to the wildest of occult speculations. The legend of the Nephilim is the first chapter in humanity's long obsession with the unknown giants of our past. While Genesis offers only a glimpse of the giants, the Book of Enoch plunges us into their world. This ancient Jewish text, attributed to the great-grandfather of Noah, expands on the Genesis account with vivid detail and cosmic drama. Long excluded from the official biblical canon, Enoch's writings survived in fragments, treasured by mystics and scholars seeking answers that mainstream religion dared not provide. In its pages, the Nephilim story becomes a tale of forbidden knowledge, celestial rebellion, and divine judgment. Enoch describes how the Watchers, heavenly beings, descended to earth and took mortal wives, teaching humanity secrets of metalworking, enchantment, and warfare. Their offspring, the giants, were monstrous in both size and appetite. Legends say they consumed not only the food of humans, but eventually turned to devouring humanity itself, unleashing devastation across the land. Their violence and hubris became the catalyst for the flood, a cosmic reset to purge the world of their corruption. These apocryphal tales are not unique to Enoch. Other ancient writings, like the Book of Jubilees and various Dead Sea Scrolls, echo similar themes. They add layers of narrative and detail, names of individual giants, their wars, and even their desperate cries as the floodwaters rise. In these stories, the giants are not only taller than men, they are imbued with a tragic grandeur, doomed by their parentage and their appetites. Reading Enoch, one senses a culture grappling with enormous questions. Where did evil and violence originate? What explains the ruins and bones that ancient people sometimes found? The giants become a symbol for all that threatens order and harmony, a cautionary tale wrapped in supernatural robes. Though Enoch's visions were once considered heretical, today they are a vital thread in the tapestry of the giant legends. The legacy of the Book of Enoch is immense. Its stories inspired generations of mystics, Gnostics, and even the early church fathers. Modern conspiracy theories about ancient giants often trace their roots directly to these enigmatic pages. Through Enoch, the giants become both a historical riddle and a window into the ancient mind, a blend of myth, memory, and moral warning that spans the ages. Travel now to the sunlit shores of ancient Greece, where legends of giants reach cosmic scale. Greek mythology is a theater of gods, monsters, and heroes, but above them all stand the Titans. These primordial giants were the first rulers of the world, children of the sky and the earth, Uranus and Gaia. Their size and power were unmatched, and even the gods of Olympus trembled before them. The most famous of these tales is the Titanomachy, the epic war between Titans and Olympians. For generations, the Titans held dominion over the cosmos, shaping mountains, rivers, and seas. Their leader, Cronus, was said to swallow his own children to prevent them from usurping his throne. Yet, in time, Zeus and his siblings rose in rebellion, casting the Titans down into Tartarus, a shadowy abyss deeper than Hades itself. To the Greeks, the Titans were not merely big, they were elemental forces, embodiments of raw creation and destruction. Their stories explained the origins of the world, the cycles of nature, and the age-old conflict between order and chaos. The aftermath of their defeat was said to be written in the landscape itself. Great boulders hurled in battle, volcanic islands, and the restless earth. Greek cities often claimed that nearby ruins or unusual natural formations were the petrified remains of these ancient battles. The Greeks also believed in other races of giants, like the Gigantes, who fought the gods in the so-called Gigantomachy. These beings were depicted as monstrous and wild, yet strangely familiar, sometimes portrayed as the ancestors of legendary heroes, or as reminders of a wilder, forgotten age. The boundaries between myth and memory blur, as oral tradition transforms distant echoes into elaborate tales. The legacy of the Titans endures in art, literature, and even language. The word Titanic itself reminds us of their colossal stature and impact. For the Greeks, as for other peoples, the giants were more than fantasy. They were an essential chapter in the story of how the world came to be, a mythic explanation for the mysterious and unexplainable. Journey now to the frozen north, where the sagas of the Norse tell of the Jötnar, giants both feared and respected. In the Prose Edda and the Poetic Edda, foundational texts of Norse mythology, the Jötnar are described as ancient beings, older than the gods themselves. They dwell in Jötunheimr, a land of cold and wilderness, forever at the edge of the known world. To the Norse mind, these giants were not only antagonists, but necessary parts of the cosmic balance. The legends begin before time itself. According to the Eddas, the first living creature was Ymir, a giant born from the melting ice of creation. From his body, the world was shaped. His flesh became the earth, his blood the seas, his bones the mountains. The gods, including Odin, were descended in part from giants, making the Jötnar both adversaries and kin. Their interactions drive much of Norse myth, from epic battles to cunning bargains. The Jötnar come in many forms, some as tall as mountains, others as shapeshifters or sorcerers. They represent not only brute strength, but also the unpredictable forces of nature, frost, fire, chaos, and time. Famous tales include Thor's endless struggle against the giant serpent Jörmungandr, and the cunning Loki, himself part giant, whose tricks often set gods and giants at odds. Norse stories do not always end with the defeat of giants. Instead, they paint a world in which the gods and giants are locked in perpetual struggle, a cycle that will only end with Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods when giants and gods alike will fall. This worldview reflects the harsh Scandinavian environment, where nature itself seemed both beautiful and deadly. The Jötnar are more than villains. They are the dark mirror of the divine, essential for the world's existence and eventual destruction. Their legends remind us that giants, in the ancient imagination, were both a threat and a source of awe, a testament to humanity's respect for the untamable forces beyond our control. Beyond the familiar myths of the West, stories of giants echo across the ancient world. In the Middle East, the Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, powerful beings sometimes described as giants, who descended from the heavens to shape early civilization. Egyptian mythology hints at enormous beings in its earliest dynasties, and in Iran, the Avesta tells of monstrous towering demons that once roamed the earth. Asian legends, too, are rich with giant lore. In India, the ancient epics recount battles with Rakshasas, giant demons capable of astonishing feats. In China, tales speak of Pangu, the first living being, whose gigantic body became the foundation of the world after his death. Indigenous cultures from the Americas, Africa, and Oceania all recall stories of giant ancestors, titanic builders, or monstrous enemies bested by culture heroes. These stories often serve as explanations for megalithic ruins, strange earthworks, or fossilized bones too large to fit known animals. Sometimes, they are woven into the origin stories of peoples, linking the present to a mythic, larger-than-life past. The giants of these cultures may differ in shape and nature, but the underlying message is the same. Once the world was inhabited by beings far greater than ourselves. The persistence of these tales across so many societies, with no apparent connection, is remarkable. Some scholars suggest they are rooted in encounters with large prehistoric animals, or with unusually tall human tribes. Others see in them psychological archetypes, the fear of the unknown, the awe of nature's power. Yet the stories endure, repeated in every corner of the ancient world. In the end, the giants of the East and beyond remind us that this is a global phenomenon. The legend is not the property of any one people. Instead, it is a thread running through all of humanity's attempts to make sense of the mysteries that lie just beyond the reach of reason. Step back and consider the astonishing breadth of the stories we have explored. From Genesis to the Eddas, from the hills of Greece to the plains of ancient Sumer, tales of giants are everywhere. Why? Why would so many different cultures, separated by oceans and millennia, all invent such similar myths? This is the universal pattern, the heart of the mystery that drives our search. One theory is that giants are a natural product of the human imagination. Early societies, confronted by the vastness of the world, the mountains, the storms, the bones of extinct creatures, projected their awe and fear onto mythical beings. Giants became explanations for the seemingly impossible. Great stones moved, ancient walls built, disasters endured. They gave a human face to forces far beyond human control. Yet the similarities are often too precise to ignore. The giants are not just big, but often associated with primordial chaos, with forbidden knowledge, or with epic battles against gods and heroes. Archaeologists have found that the oldest myths usually center around a lost golden age, a time when gods, monsters, and giants walked the earth together. When that age ended, order was restored, and ordinary humans inherited the world. Another possibility is that these stories enshrine memories of real encounters, perhaps with other hominin species, or with rare individuals of extraordinary size. Fossil finds of large prehistoric animals, like mammoths or dinosaur bones, may also have triggered giant legends. In many cases, the discovery of oversized skeletons or artifacts led storytellers to invent larger-than-life builders to explain them. Ultimately, the universal pattern is what keeps the legend of giants alive. It is a puzzle with no easy answer, a question that unites us across time and culture. Whether as literal beings, symbols, or misunderstood memories, giants are a testament to the mystery at the core of the human experience. As we gather the ancient accounts, a tapestry of recurring themes emerges, yet so do new questions. Giants are almost always linked to a lost age, a cataclysm, or a dramatic fall from grace. Whether it's the flood of Genesis, the Titanomachy of Greece, or Ragnarok in the Norse sagas, the giant's reign ends with violence and transformation. Why do these stories so often end in destruction? Is this a memory of real catastrophe, or a metaphor for the triumph of order over chaos? A striking commonality is the relationship between giants and the gods. Sometimes they are enemies, battling for control of the cosmos. Sometimes they are kin, ancestors or rivals whose bloodlines mix with those of mortals and deities alike. This blurring of boundaries hints at a deeper truth, that the giants in our myths are not merely outsiders, but mirrors of our own potential for greatness and destruction. Perhaps the most profound question is this: if there is even a fragment of truth in these legends, where did the giants go? Did they perish in apocalyptic floods or wars? Did they dwindle and disappear, leaving only stories behind? Or is their memory a cipher, encoding secrets lost to time, about our origins, our fears, and our dreams? The journey through ancient accounts raises far more questions than it answers. Yet it is in these questions that the legend of giants finds its enduring power. The stories are not just relics of the past, but invitations to wonder, to investigate, and to imagine what worlds may have existed before our own. The story of the giants does not remain confined to ancient texts and mythologies. As the 19th century dawned, it exploded into the modern world with a series of honestly pretty shocking claims. Across America and Europe, local newspapers, the primary source of information for the masses, began to publish sensational reports. They told of incredible discoveries made by farmers, laborers, and amateur archaeologists. These were not just stories of old bones, but of enormous human skeletons, far exceeding the height of any known person. The legends were seemingly crawling out of the earth and into the pages of the daily news, creating a public frenzy that swept across nations. It was an age of discovery, where anything seemed possible, and the past felt very much alive. These accounts were often astonishingly specific. They described skeletons measuring 7, 8, and sometimes even 10 or 12 feet in length. The articles detailed the locations of these finds, from ancient burial mounds in the Ohio Valley to forgotten caves in the American West. They spoke of skulls of immense size, jawbones that could fit over a normal man's face, and femurs far longer than those of an average human. These were not just whispers or rumors. They were printed in black and white, presented as factual news. For a public hungry for wonder, these discoveries offered tangible proof that the giants of myth were real, and their remains were buried just beneath their feet. The reports triggered a wave of excitement and amateur excavation. All across the country, people began digging into local mounds and historical sites, hoping to unearth their own giant. Each new discovery, whether real or imagined, was reported with breathless enthusiasm, adding another layer to the growing legend. The narrative was compelling. A lost race of giants had once roamed the continent, a forgotten chapter of history that was now being pieced together, one colossal bone at a time. The stories captured the imagination of a generation, blurring the line between scientific inquiry and a treasure hunt for the remnants of a mythic past. This period represents a unique intersection of folklore, journalism, and early archaeology. Before strict scientific protocols were established, discoveries were often handled by untrained individuals, and their findings were filtered through the lens of popular belief. The newspapers, eager for a captivating story, rarely questioned the claims. They simply reported what was told to them, fueling a cycle of discovery and speculation. This whirlwind of headlines created a powerful and enduring belief that the evidence for giants was not only real, but abundant, setting the stage for decades of debate and controversy that continue to this day. The heartland of America, particularly the Ohio and Mississippi River valleys, became the epicenter of these giant discoveries. This region is dotted with thousands of ancient earthworks, mysterious mounds and geometric enclosures built by a sophisticated prehistoric culture. When 19th century settlers began plowing these lands and excavating these mounds, they found them to be vast repositories of artifacts and human remains. Among the standard burials, reports of exceptionally large skeletons began to surface with startling frequency. The so-called mound builder race, whose identity was then a subject of intense debate, was now being conflated with a lost race of giants. Dozens, if not hundreds, of these reports were documented in local histories and county records. For example, in the 1880s, an excavation of a mound in West Virginia reportedly yielded a male skeleton measuring 7 feet, 6 inches tall. Similar finds were chronicled throughout Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. These skeletons were often described as being buried with a level of ceremony, accompanied by copper armor, finely crafted pipes, and pearl beads, suggesting they were kings or revered leaders. The sheer volume of these accounts, emerging independently from different locations over many decades, created a compelling pattern that was difficult for many to dismiss as mere coincidence. These discoveries were not always made by amateurs. Antiquarians and early archaeologists associated with historical societies also reported finding large skeletons. They meticulously measured the bones and documented the burial sites, with their findings published in journals and reports of the time. While their methods may not meet modern standards, their records provide a fascinating glimpse into a period when the possibility of giants was treated as a serious scientific question. They were not just digging for bones, they were searching for the identity of the people who built these magnificent mounds, and the evidence seemed to point towards beings of extraordinary stature. The narrative of the giant mound builders became a powerful American myth. It suggested that a noble and powerful race, separate from the Native American populations, had once ruled the continent before mysteriously vanishing. This idea was convenient for some, as it provided a justification for westward expansion by suggesting the land was once held by a different, now extinct people. Regardless of the motivations, the mounds of North America became inextricably linked with the legend of giants. The earth itself seemed to be offering up proof, turning ancient soil into the front line of a search for a forgotten history. Among the many tales of giant discoveries in North America, none is more famous or enduring than the story of the Ka, the red-haired giants of Nevada. The legend actually originates from the oral traditions of the local Paiute tribe. For centuries, the Paiute told stories of a war fought with a ferocious race of red-haired, cannibalistic giants who lived in the area. According to their lore, after a long and brutal conflict, the tribes managed to trap the last of these giants in a cave, piled brush at the entrance, and set it ablaze, exterminating them. That cave, known today as Lovelock Cave, became a place of great significance in their cultural history. In 1911, 2 miners, David Pugh and James Hart, began excavating the cave for bat guano to be sold as fertilizer. As they dug through layers of sediment, they began to uncover a treasure trove of incredible prehistoric artifacts. But they also found something more startling. They claimed to have unearthed numerous skeletons that were unusually large, some allegedly over 8 feet tall, with remnants of red hair still clinging to their skulls. The story quickly spread, appearing to provide stunning physical confirmation of the Paiute legends. The red-haired giants of Lovelock Cave were no longer just a myth. They were now, at least for a while, an archaeological reality. The discoveries attracted the attention of archaeologists, including Llewellyn L. Loud from the University of California. Official excavations were conducted, and thousands of artifacts were recovered, painting a rich picture of life in the region thousands of years ago. However, the official reports were far more conservative than the sensationalist newspaper accounts. While some remains were found, and some hair was indeed reddish-brown, a common result of age and burial conditions, there was no official confirmation of a race of giant skeletons. The largest skeletons were tall, but really, they were within the range of normal human variation. Despite the lack of definitive scientific proof, the legend of the Lovelock giants has only grown stronger over time. The story has everything: ancient tribal lore, a dramatic battle, a hidden cave, and the tantalizing discovery of physical remains. Believers argue that the most compelling evidence, such as the largest skulls and skeletons, was either lost, mishandled by the miners, or worse, deliberately suppressed. The tale of the sea Tekar remains a cornerstone of giant lore, a perfect example of how oral history and ambiguous archaeological finds can merge to create a legend that is almost impossible to disprove in the public imagination. As reports of giant skeleton discoveries mounted throughout the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a new and darker element entered the narrative: the conspiracy theory. Central to this theory is one of America's most respected institutions, the Smithsonian. According to a persistent and widespread claim, the Smithsonian Institution was not a passive observer in these discoveries. Instead, it is accused of actively participating in a massive systematic cover-up to hide the existence of giants from the public. The allegation is that the institution dispatched agents to collect these oversized skeletons from excavators and then made them disappear, effectively erasing them from history. The narrative of this conspiracy is detailed and specific. Proponents point to numerous old newspaper articles that mention the Smithsonian collecting anomalous finds. They claim that once these skeletons were in the institution's possession, they were never seen or heard from again. The motive for such a cover-up, according to the theory, is to protect the established narrative of human evolution and North American history. The existence of an advanced race of giants would shatter the conventional timeline and force a complete rewriting of history books. Therefore, the evidence had to be destroyed to maintain the scientific and historical status quo. This claim gained significant traction in the digital age, with articles and videos citing alleged court cases where the Smithsonian was supposedly forced to admit to destroying thousands of giant human skeletons. These claims, however, have been thoroughly debunked. The supposed court documents are fabrications, and the Smithsonian has repeatedly and publicly denied these accusations, stating that they have no such skeletons in their collection and no records of having destroyed them. They argue that the institution's name was often invoked incorrectly in old articles, or that finds were misidentified in the field. Despite the lack of credible evidence, the Smithsonian cover-up theory remains one of the most powerful and popular aspects of the giant mystery. It provides a simple and compelling answer to the most difficult question: if thousands of giant skeletons were found, where are they now? The answer, for believers, is clear. They were deliberately hidden by a powerful organization afraid of the truth. This transforms the search for giants from a simple archaeological question into a battle against a shadowy cabal, making the story all the more enticing and resistant to scientific dismissal. While the idea of a grand conspiracy is dramatic, a more mundane and verifiable explanation accounts for many of the giant skeleton reports, hoaxes and honest misinterpretations. The 19th century was not just an age of discovery, it was also the golden age of the sideshow and the hoax. Showmen like P.T. Barnum proved that the public had a voracious appetite for the strange and unbelievable, and that there was money to be made from manufacturing wonder. The Cardiff Giant, a 10-foot-tall petrified man discovered in 1869 in New York, was one of the most famous hoaxes of the era, fooling thousands before it was revealed to be a carved gypsum statue. Many of the newspaper reports of giant skeletons likely fall into this category. A local farmer looking for a bit of fame or a town seeking to attract visitors could easily fabricate a story. Bones from large animals like bison or bears could be passed off as parts of a giant human. In other cases, skeletons were simply assembled incorrectly, or their measurements were wildly exaggerated for the sake of a good story. Without rigorous scientific oversight, there was little to stop a tall tale from becoming accepted as fact, especially when it was printed in the local newspaper. The modern era has its own version of the Cardiff giant digital manipulation. The rise of the internet and photo editing software has led to a new wave of giant hoaxes. Images depicting enormous skulls being excavated by archaeologists regularly go viral. One of the most famous examples was an image of a giant human skeleton being unearthed at a site in the Arabian desert. This image was later revealed to be an entry for a Photoshop competition. Despite being repeatedly debunked, these faked photographs continue to circulate online as proof of the Smithsonian cover-up. Beyond deliberate deception, simple misinterpretation played a significant role. Early excavators, lacking a modern understanding of taphonomy, the study of how organisms decay and become fossilized, could easily make mistakes. A skeleton that had been disarticulated and scattered before burial might be reassembled incorrectly, leading to an exaggerated height. The settling of soil could crush and distort bones, making them appear larger. And sometimes people simply found what they wanted to find, their belief in giants coloring their interpretation of the evidence before them. The desire to believe can be a powerful force, capable of turning an ordinary discovery into an extraordinary one. After sifting through, a century of sensational headlines, persistent legends, and deliberate hoaxes, where does that leave us? What is the official verdict from the world of mainstream science and archaeology? The answer is unequivocal and, for some folks, deeply unsatisfying. Despite all the stories and those alleged discoveries, there is not a single, undisputed giant skeleton on display in any museum in the world. There is no scientifically verified fossil or biological evidence to support the existence of a race of 8, 10, or 15-foot-tall humans. Every claim that has been rigorously investigated has either been debunked or found to have, a more conventional explanation. Archaeologists and anthropologists explain that many of the skeletons reported in the 19th century were likely individuals who were indeed tall for their time, perhaps between 6.5 and 7 feet. To people whose average height was closer to 5.5 feet, such individuals would have appeared gigantic. These skeletons, while rare, are well within the bounds of human genetic variation. Other finds have been identified as the bones of large prehistoric megafauna, like giant sloths or mammoths, which were mistaken for human remains by untrained excavators. The double rows of teeth often reported are now understood to be a common result of a dental condition, or simply the misidentification of adult teeth growing in beneath baby teeth in adolescence. The lack of physical evidence is, honestly, the single biggest hurdle for the giant theory. A population of giant beings would have left behind a significant fossil record. We find the bones of dinosaurs that lived millions of years ago, so it stands to reason that we would find the remains of a relatively recent population of giants. Yet we have found none. The scientific method demands physical, repeatable, and verifiable evidence. Anecdotes, old newspaper clippings, and blurry photos just aren't enough to rewrite the entire history of the human species. Science doesn't deny the possibility out of malice. It simply requires a level of proof that has never been provided. This leaves us at a crossroads between myth and evidence. On one hand, we have a powerful and universal cultural memory of giants, supported by a century of tantalizing but unverified reports. On the other hand, we have the stark silence of the fossil record and the firm conclusions of biology and archaeology. This is the central tension of the giant mystery. The stories say yes, but the science says no. But here's what we do know for certain. The belief in giants and the search for their remains tells us something profound about ourselves. It reveals our fascination with the unknown, our desire for a past more wondrous than our present, and our unending quest to find our place in a history that may be far stranger than we imagine. We've journeyed through myth and sifted through the dust of alleged discoveries. Now we must face the cold, unforgiving reality of science. The single greatest obstacle to the existence of towering human-shaped giants is not a conspiracy or a lack of imagination, but a fundamental principle of physics. It's called the square-cube law. First articulated by Galileo Galilei centuries ago, this law is simple, elegant, and utterly brutal in its implications for giant beings. It governs the relationship between size, area, and volume, and it dictates that you just can't scale something up without facing catastrophic consequences. The square-cube law is the silent tyrant that rules the world of biology. Here's how it works. When you double the height of an object, like a human, you don't just double everything else. Its surface area, which includes the cross-section of its bones and muscles, increases by a factor of 4. That's the square part of the law. But its volume, and therefore its mass and weight, increases by a factor of 8. That's the cube part. This creates a massive problem. A human who is twice as tall would be 8 times as heavy, but their bones and muscles would only be 4 times as strong to support that immense new weight. The strain would be unbearable. It's a mathematical certainty that crushes the fantasy of a 20-foot giant. Think of it like this. Imagine an ant. An ant can carry many times its own body weight. It seems impossibly strong. But if you were to scale that ant up to the size of an elephant, the square-cube law would take effect. Its weight would increase exponentially, far faster than the strength of its legs. The giant ant would collapse under its own mass, its delicate exoskeleton shattering into pieces. The same principle applies to humans. A 30-foot giant, as described in some legends, would not be a mighty warrior. They would be a fragile, immobile creature whose every moment would be a battle against the crushing force of their own weight. This law explains why large animals are built so differently from small ones. An elephant doesn't look like a scaled-up mouse. It has thick, pillar-like legs and a stocky frame specifically evolved to support its tremendous mass. Its entire biological structure is a solution to the problem posed by the square-cube law. For a humanoid giant to exist, they couldn't simply be a larger version of us. They would have to be a completely different kind of creature, one whose anatomy was radically redesigned to cope with the crushing reality of physics. The elegant, proportional giants of myth simply could not stand up. Beyond the abstract math of the square-cube law lies the messy, practical reality of biology. Our bodies are intricate machines, fine-tuned by millions of years of evolution to operate within a very specific size range. Every component, from our bones to our heart, is calibrated to function under the pull of Earth's gravity. If you dramatically increase the size of that machine, the entire system begins to break down. The first point of failure would be our skeleton. Human bone is incredibly strong, but it has its limits. The bones of a 15-foot tall human would be under such immense and constant stress that they'd be prone to fractures from the slightest misstep. To compensate, a giant's bones would need to be proportionally much thicker and denser than our own. They'd need to be less like human bones and more like solid pillars of stone. This creates a new problem: weight. Such dense bones would add even more mass to an already impossibly heavy frame, creating a vicious cycle of increasing weight and the need for even stronger support. The giant would become a prisoner of its own skeleton, a walking fortress so heavy it could barely move. The agility and power described in the myths would be a biological impossibility. Every step would be a slow, ponderous and painful effort. Then there is the challenge of the heart. Your heart is a remarkable pump, working tirelessly to circulate blood throughout your body, delivering oxygen and nutrients to every cell. For a 6-foot person, this is already a demanding job. Now imagine a person who is 20 feet tall. Their heart would need to pump blood over 3 times the vertical distance, fighting gravity every inch of the way. The organ would need to be monstrously large and powerful, generating blood pressure so high it would risk rupturing the very vessels it was trying to supply. The strain would be unimaginable. Even if the heart could handle the pressure, the rest of the circulatory system couldn't. The veins in the giant's legs would be under enormous hydrostatic pressure, leading to chronic swelling, varicose veins, and skin ulcers. The simple act of standing up would cause blood to pool in their lower extremities, potentially causing them to faint. Their respiratory system would struggle to draw in enough oxygen to power their massive body, leaving them perpetually out of breath. Biologically speaking, the human form is simply not designed for gigantism. It is a blueprint for a creature of our size, and it just cannot be stretched without breaking. We don't have to rely on hypotheticals to understand the immense challenges of extreme height. Modern medicine has given us a real-world example in the form of Robert Wadlow, the tallest man in recorded history. Born in Alton, Illinois in 1918, Robert appeared to be a normal baby. But an overactive pituitary gland caused his body to produce an enormous amount of human growth hormone. He never stopped growing. By the age of 8, he was taller than his father. As a young adult, he stood at a staggering 8 feet 11.1 inches tall. Robert Wadlow was as close to a real-life giant as our species has ever produced. His life provides a sobering glimpse into the reality of gigantism. He was known as the gentle giant, beloved for his mild-mannered and kind personality. But his extraordinary size came at a terrible cost. His body was in a constant battle with itself. He required leg braces to walk, as his bones and joints struggled to support his 439-pound frame. His immense height also meant he had little sensation in his feet and lower legs. He couldn't feel if his shoes were rubbing or if he had injured himself. A dangerous vulnerability for someone so large. His life was a series of medical challenges. The strain on his circulatory system was immense. His heart worked overtime to pump blood to his extremities, and his body struggled to maintain itself. Despite his fame and the public's fascination with his size, his life was not easy. Everyday objects were not built for him. He needed custom-made clothes, a custom-made bed, and even a custom-made desk for his school days. The world was simply not designed for a person of his stature. He was an outlier, a biological anomaly in a world built for smaller people, and his health suffered as a consequence of his unique condition. Robert Wadlow's life was tragically short. In 1940, at the age of just 22, a poorly fitted leg brace caused a blister on his ankle. Because of the lack of feeling in his feet, he didn't notice the injury until it had become severely infected. The infection spread, and his body, already weakened by the constant strain of its own size, was unable to fight it off. He passed away in his sleep. His story is a poignant and powerful illustration of the scientific reality. If a height of nearly 9 feet was so destructive to the human body, what would a height of 15 or 20 feet do? Robert Wadlow is the ultimate proof that true gigantism is not a gift, but a crushing burden. The case of Robert Wadlow is not unique, though it is the most extreme. His condition, known as pituitary gigantism, is a recognized medical disorder. It is not a sign of a separate, superior race of giants, but a malfunction of the endocrine system. When the pituitary gland, a small pea-sized organ at the base of the brain, produces too much growth hormone during childhood, The body's bones and tissues grow uncontrollably. This is what leads to the extreme height seen in individuals like Wadlow. It is not a pathway to becoming a mythical hero. It is a serious and life-threatening illness that requires medical intervention. The health problems associated with gigantism are numerous and severe. Sufferers often experience debilitating joint pain, arthritis, and skeletal deformities like scoliosis. The constant growth puts immense pressure on the entire musculoskeletal system. Furthermore, the condition is linked to a host of other issues, including cardiovascular disease, hypertension, diabetes, and vision problems. The same hormonal imbalance that causes the extreme growth also disrupts the body's other delicate systems. It is a cascade of failures, where one problem creates another, leading to a significant reduction in both quality of life and life expectancy. Modern medicine has developed treatments for pituitary gigantism. If diagnosed early, doctors can use surgery, medication, or radiation therapy to control the production of growth hormone and halt the abnormal growth. These interventions can prevent the most severe complications and allow individuals to live longer, healthier lives. This medical reality stands in stark contrast to the mythical portrayal of giants. The giants of legend are depicted as paragons of strength and vitality. The real-world giants of medicine are patients, individuals struggling with a difficult and complex disease that attacks their bodies from within. This understanding completely reframes the discovery of large skeletons from the past. When 19th century excavators found a 7-foot skeleton, they saw a member of a lost giant race. A modern forensic anthropologist would see something very different: the tragic remains of an individual who likely suffered from a pituitary disorder. They would look for the telltale signs of the condition in the bone structure: an enlarged jaw, thickened fingers, and evidence of joint damage. What was once seen as proof of myth is now understood as evidence of pathology. The giant was not a monster or a hero, but a human being who endured a rare and difficult medical journey. Let's engage in a thought experiment. If the standard human blueprint is so ill-suited for giant stature, what would a biologically viable 15-foot-tall humanoid actually look like? To survive, it would need to be radically different from us. We must throw away the image of a perfectly scaled-up human and start from scratch, re-engineering the body to solve the problems of mass and gravity. The result would be something far less majestic and far more alien than the giants of our legends. It would be a creature born from the brutal necessities of physics and biology, not from the dreams of mythology. First, its proportions would be all wrong by our standards. To support its immense weight, its legs would be incredibly thick and columnar, more like the legs of an elephant than a human. The bones would be short and dense, sacrificing agility for stability. Its feet would be enormous and flat, designed to distribute its weight over the widest possible area. It would likely have a wide, squat torso to lower its center of gravity. The graceful, long-limbed giants of folklore would be replaced by a creature that was built like a walking tank, slow and ponderous in its movements. Its internal systems would need a complete overhaul. The heart would have to be a multi-chambered, ridiculously powerful pump, perhaps with secondary booster hearts in the limbs to help circulate blood against gravity. Its lungs would have to be far more efficient than our own, perhaps incorporating an avian-style respiratory system that allows for a continuous flow of oxygen to power its massive muscle tissues. Its skin would need to be thick and leathery, almost like a hide, to withstand the high blood pressure and protect against injury. It would be a biological marvel, but it would not be human. Even its head and neck would be different. A human-proportioned head on a 15-foot body would be incredibly heavy, putting immense strain on the spine. The neck would need to be short and thick, supported by massive trapezius muscles, giving it a hunched, brutish appearance. the creature would look less like a Greek god and more like a strange bipedal rhinoceros. This is the creature that science predicts, a being whose form is dictated entirely by the struggle to stand upright. It is a powerful image, but it bears little resemblance to the mighty men of old or the titans who warred with the gods. Ultimately, the laws of physics deliver the final verdict on the existence of giants as they are described in myth. It's not just their bodies that would fail them. The world itself is not built to their scale. Every aspect of the natural environment, from the strength of the ground they walk on to the height of the trees, is calibrated for creatures of a certain size. A true giant would find our world to be a fragile and treacherous place, a landscape full of things to break and places to fall. Their very existence would be a constant, clumsy struggle against their surroundings. Imagine for a moment a 20-foot giant walking through a forest. They would be constantly stooping to avoid branches, their size making them clumsy and slow. The ground itself might not be stable enough to support their concentrated weight. Soft soil could turn to quicksand, and a simple misstep on uneven terrain could lead to a catastrophic fall. For a creature of that size, a fall from a standing height is not a minor accident. It's a life-threatening event. The force of the impact would be enormous, easily capable of shattering their already overstressed bones. They would be prisoners of flat, open plains. Even basic survival would be a challenge. A creature of that size would require a colossal number of calories to survive each day. They would need to eat constantly, consuming vast amounts of food just to maintain their body temperature and fuel their metabolism. This would make them highly vulnerable to famine and environmental changes. In a world populated by smaller, more efficient, and more numerous creatures like early humans, a giant would be at a severe evolutionary disadvantage. They would be the first to starve when resources became scarce. This scientific reality paints a bleak picture for the giants of legend. It tells us that the world as we know it, governed by the unyielding laws of physics and biology, simply has no room for them. The stories are powerful, the folklore is compelling, but the science is clear. The absence of giant skeletons is not necessarily evidence of a cover-up. It is the expected outcome in a world where such creatures are a biological impossibility. The mystery then shifts. The question is no longer could giants exist, but rather why in the face of all scientific reason do we so desperately want them to? Having confronted the stark realities of physics and biology, our investigation now pivots back to the world of ancient myth, searching for a different kind of answer. If giants existed, what could have possibly wiped them out on a global scale? The ancient accounts themselves provide a dramatic and terrifying possibility: a great flood. The story of a world-drowning deluge is not unique to a single culture. It is a narrative found on every inhabited continent, a universal scar on the memory of humankind. From the plains of Mesopotamia to the mountains of the Andes and across the islands of the Pacific, hundreds of cultures tell a story of a time when the waters rose and washed the world clean. This is one of the most powerful and persistent myths in human history. The consistency of these flood narratives is staggering. While the details may vary, the hero who builds the boat, the gods who send the rain, the duration of the cataclysm, the core elements remain hauntingly similar. They speak of a primordial world, often one that has become corrupt or chaotic. They describe a divine decision to destroy humanity with water, sparing only a chosen few to repopulate a cleansed earth. In many of these tales, the corruption of the old world is directly linked to the presence of powerful, arrogant beings, often described as giants. The flood, in this context, is not just a natural disaster. It is a deliberate act of cosmic purification, an event designed to wipe the slate clean and end an age of monstrosities. This global pattern demands an explanation. How did so many disconnected cultures arrive at the same fundamental story? Skeptics argue that floods are a common local experience, and that early societies living near rivers or coastlines would naturally develop myths about catastrophic inundations, which were then exaggerated over time. It's a plausible explanation for any single myth, but it struggles to account for the sheer number and similarity of the stories worldwide, even among cultures living in deserts or high mountains where such floods seem unlikely. The universality of the myth compels us to consider a more profound origin. Could these stories be the fragmented, distorted memory of a genuine global or near-global catastrophe that occurred in the distant past? Is it possible that our ancient ancestors witnessed an event so traumatic that it was seared into our collective consciousness, passed down through generations as the story of the Great Flood? If such an event did happen, it provides a potential kill mechanism for the giants of legend. A cataclysm of that magnitude would be indiscriminate, wiping out the mighty and the meek alike. For a species already struggling against the biological disadvantages of their size, a world-altering flood could have been the final fatal blow. Nowhere is the connection between giants and a great flood more explicit than in the ancient texts of the Near East. The biblical book of Genesis provides the most famous account in the Western world. As we explored earlier, Genesis chapter 6 describes the earth being filled with violence and corruption in the days of the Nephilim, the mighty men of old. The text makes a direct causal link. The world had become wicked. The giants were a symptom of this wickedness, and therefore, God resolved to destroy all life with a flood. The deluge is presented as a specific and targeted solution to the problem of the giants and the chaos they represented. Noah's Ark was not just a vessel for survival, it was a genetic bottleneck designed to reset the world to a purely human lineage. This narrative is not an isolated invention. It is part of a much older tradition of flood literature from ancient Mesopotamia. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest surviving works of literature in the world, contains a strikingly similar story. In this tale, the gods decide to destroy humankind with a flood because their noise has become unbearable. A man named Utnapishtim is warned by a sympathetic god and instructed to build a massive boat to save his family and the seeds of all living things. The parallels to the story of Noah are undeniable, suggesting that both accounts stem from a common, even older, source memory of a catastrophic flood that devastated the region. While Gilgamesh does not explicitly name giants as the cause of the flood, the theme of divine anger at a world grown too proud and chaotic resonates with the Genesis account. In these stories, the flood serves as a great equalizer. It is an event so powerful that it overwhelms even the strongest of beings. The giants, with all their might and power, were helpless against the rising waters. Their fortresses would be submerged, their strength useless against the inexorable power of a world drowning. The flood provides a perfect narrative explanation for their disappearance. They were simply washed away, their bodies lost to the depths, leaving behind only the stories of their existence. These ancient epics present a powerful, internally consistent theory for the end of giants. They frame the deluge not as a random accident, but as a necessary, purposeful event. It was the end of one chapter of Earth's history and the beginning of another. The age of myths, monsters, and giants was over, drowned beneath a global sea of divine judgment. The new world would belong to humanity alone. This theory, drawn directly from the most ancient accounts, posits that the giants didn't slowly die out or evolve away. They were definitively and catastrophically exterminated, their end as dramatic as their fabled lives. The myth of a global flood is not supported by science, but ancient people did witness cataclysmic events. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis suggests a comet or asteroid struck Earth 12,800 years ago, causing megafloods, wildfires, and a dramatic climate shift. Such disasters would have devastated large creatures, including any hypothetical giants, by destroying habitats and collapsing food chains. Flood myths may be memories of these real catastrophes, debris falling as rain, tsunamis as floods. Other theories, like supervolcanoes or pole shifts, also offer plausible explanations for sudden global disasters. These scientific scenarios provide a foundation for the enduring legend of a world-ending flood and the extinction of giants. The end of the last ice age was a time of violent change, rapid warming, melting glaciers, and catastrophic floods. Proglacial lakes burst, unleashing megafloods that reshaped continents and made survival impossible for many species. The land itself rebounded, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, while sea levels rose, drowning ancient coastlines. Megafauna like mammoths and saber-toothed cats vanished, unable to adapt to the new world. If giants existed, they too would have faced extinction, losing habitat, food, and the battle for survival. The end of the Ice Age was a ruthless filter, especially for the largest creatures. For ancient peoples, it was a world transformed overnight. Perhaps giants didn't vanish in a single disaster, but faded away as the climate changed. Adapted to the Ice Age, their size became a liability as prey disappeared and forests replaced open plains. Competing with adaptable humans, giants would have struggled to survive. Their decline was slow, a dwindling population, isolated and outmatched. Myths of wars with giants may echo these final struggles for territory and resources. The legend of giants is a memory of a world lost to relentless environmental change. What if giants were never meant to be taken literally? Myths may use giants as metaphors for power, ancient knowledge, or lost civilizations. In a world without scientific language, stories encoded history, psychology, and philosophy. Giants could symbolize conquerors, powerful rulers, or vanished societies. The absence of bones isn't a mystery. Giants were ideas, not a species. The real question: what did these legends truly represent? Giants may have symbolized the powerful elite, kings, conquerors, and ruling classes. Myths describe them as mighty men, men of renown, echoes of aristocracy, not monsters. Stories of giants consuming resources reflect memories of tyrannical rulers. Ancient art often depicted rulers as physically larger, a metaphor for their status. Over time, the line between metaphor and literal giant blurred in oral tradition. The legend preserves a truth, the memory of overwhelming power transformed into myth. Giants of history became giants of folklore. Carl Jung saw giants as archetypes, universal symbols in the collective unconscious. The giant represents overwhelming power, chaos, and the untamed forces within nature and ourselves. Myths of heroes battling giants are psychological dramas, struggles to master our own inner chaos. These stories guide us through personal growth, not just ancient history. Every culture tells giant tales because every person faces their own giants. The legend endures because it speaks to universal human challenges. The story of giants is the story of us all. While the symbolic and psychological interpretations are powerful, there is also a simpler, more direct explanation for how giant legends may have formed. The natural human tendency to exaggerate, combined with the fallibility of memory over long periods. Imagine a small, isolated tribe encountering another group of people for the first time. If this new group was simply taller on average, perhaps a people who were consistently over 6 feet tall encountering a population with an average height of 5 feet, the difference would be striking. To the smaller group, these newcomers would seem like giants. As the story of this encounter was passed down from one generation to the next, simple exaggeration would inevitably take hold. Oral tradition is like a game of telephone played over centuries. Each storyteller, wanting to make the tale more impressive and memorable, adds a little embellishment. A man who was as tall as a giant becomes, in the next telling, an actual giant. A tribe of tall warriors becomes a race of fearsome colossi. Over hundreds or thousands of years, a simple encounter with a tall but entirely human group can be transformed into a foundational myth about a lost race of supernatural beings. The core of the story, the memory of an encounter with larger people, is real, but its details have been magnified by time and narrative flair. This process can also be fueled by the discovery of mysterious objects. Imagine an ancient people stumbling upon the fossilized bones of a mammoth or a dinosaur. Without a modern understanding of paleontology, they would have no framework for identifying these remains, other than to compare them to what they knew. A mammoth's femur is shaped vaguely like a human femur, but it is enormously larger. The most logical conclusion for them would be that it belonged to a giant human. The discovery of a single large fossil could thus give birth to an entire mythology, providing physical proof for a race of giants that never existed. Similarly, megalithic structures like Stonehenge or Sacsayhuaman, whose construction methods were forgotten over time, would demand an explanation. For a later culture living among these ruins, it might seem impossible that their own ancestors, using the technology they possessed, could have built such things. The easiest and most awe-inspiring explanation is that a previous, more powerful race was responsible. It must have been giants becomes the default answer for any mystery that defies conventional explanation. In this way, the gaps in our historical memory are filled with the grand and satisfying legend of giants. There is one final, more introspective way to interpret the legend of the giants. Perhaps the stories are not about a separate race at all, but about humanity itself. The tales of giants often carry a strong moral lesson. They are beings of immense power, but they are also arrogant, destructive, and consumed by hubris. They challenge the gods, oppress the weak, and bring chaos to the world. Their inevitable downfall serves as a cautionary tale. Power corrupts, and pride comes before a fall. In this reading, the giants are a dark mirror, reflecting humanity's own potential for greatness and its capacity for self-destruction. Think of our own civilization. We build structures that dwarf anything in the ancient world, reaching literally into the clouds. We wield technologies that allow us to reshape the planet, redirect rivers, and harness the power of the atom. From the perspective of our own ancient ancestors, we would be the giants. We are the beings of immense godlike power. And just like the giants of myth, we are often arrogant and destructive. We consume the Earth's resources at an unsustainable rate. We wage wars of unimaginable devastation, and our actions threaten to bring about a global cataclysm in the form of climate change. The ancient myths of the giants' fall, drowned in a flood, cast down by the gods, or destroyed by their own excesses, can be read as a prophetic warning for us. The flood that wiped out the Nephilim could be a metaphor for the rising sea levels that threaten our coastal cities. The war between the Titans and the Olympians could symbolize the generational struggle over the future of our planet. The stories warn us that any civilization that grows too powerful and too arrogant that loses its connection to the natural order and its sense of humility, is doomed to collapse under the weight of its own success. This interpretation brings the ancient mystery crashing into our present reality on May 24, 2024. The giants never disappeared because they were never a separate they. They are an aspect of us. The legend is a timeless allegory about the human condition, a perpetual story about the cycle of power, hubris, and collapse. The question, then, is not whether we can find the bones of ancient giants, but whether we can learn from their story. Are we destined to repeat their fate? Or can we, unlike the giants of myth, find a way to balance our immense power with wisdom and humility, and avoid the cataclysm that is so often the final chapter in their tale? Our journey has taken us from the whispers of ancient myth to the unyielding laws of modern science, from the dusty newspaper archives of the 19th century to the symbolic landscapes of the human mind. We have chased the shadows of the Nephilim, the Titans, and the Jötnar, and we have stood in the colossal footsteps of Robert Wadlow. We have weighed the tantalizing possibility of a lost history against the stark silence of the fossil record. After all this, the central question remains, hanging in the air like an ancient mist. Where did the giants really go? The definitive physical proof of their existence remains as elusive today, on May 24, 2024, as it has ever been. No museum holds their bones, and no scientific paper has verified their DNA. Yet the absence of proof has never been enough to silence the story. The legend of giants endures not because of the evidence we have, but precisely because of the evidence we lack. This void creates a space for wonder, for speculation, and for the profound human need to believe that the world is more mysterious and grand than it appears. The search for giants is a search for enchantment in an age of disenchantment. It is a rebellion against a world that has been thoroughly mapped, measured, and explained. The stories persist because they offer a tantalizing glimpse into a past where the world was wilder, the stakes were higher, and humanity was not the only intelligence to walk the earth. The giants represent a fundamental what-if that resonates deep within our collective psyche. What if we are not the pinnacle of creation? What if a greater, more powerful civilization preceded our own? This question challenges our deepest assumptions about our place in the universe. In looking for giants, we are perhaps looking for a sense of perspective, a humbling reminder that our own time on this planet is just one chapter in a much longer, stranger story. The legend is a mirror reflecting our own anxieties about our origins and our ultimate fate. A story that forces us to confront the vastness of time and the fragility of our own dominion over the planet. Ultimately, the quest for giants is a testament to the power of a good story. The tales have survived for millennia, not because they are scientifically accurate, but because they are psychologically true. They speak to our fears of the unknown, our awe of power, our fascination with ruin, and our hope for a world imbued with meaning and mystery. The giants may never have existed in flesh and blood, but they are very real in the landscape of our imagination. They are a permanent and powerful fixture of the human story, an echo from a forgotten time that we can't help but strain to hear, generation after generation. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not where the giants went, but why every culture on Earth felt the need to remember them. The stories are too consistent, too widespread to be a simple coincidence. Every civilization seems to recall something fundamental, a time when humanity was different, when our potential was either terrifyingly greater or terrifyingly smaller. The legends of giants might not be a memory of a separate species we encountered. Instead, they could be the fragmented, mythologized memory of a different version of ourselves, a forgotten branch of the human family tree whose story has been transformed into legend over countless millennia of oral tradition. Consider this final twist. What if the giants never truly disappeared because they were never entirely separate from us? What if the stories are not about a race that was, but about a potential that still is? The legends consistently link giants to the gods, to divine parentage, and to a level of power beyond the mortal coil. They represent a state of being that is more than human. Perhaps the stories are not a record of the past, but an allegorical map of our own evolution. They are a cultural memory of humanity's own struggle to overcome its brutish, chaotic, giant nature and become the ordered, civilized beings we are today. This reframes the entire narrative. The giants were not a people we conquered, but an aspect of our own nature that we had to tame. The great wars between gods and giants, or humans and giants, become metaphors for the inner conflict that forged modern consciousness. It is the story of our organized, rational minds, the gods, the heroes, gaining ascendancy over our primal, chaotic instincts, the giants. The flood that wiped them out was not a physical deluge, but a cognitive or cultural revolution that forever changed who we are, burying our own primordial past so deeply that we can only glimpse it now through the dark lens of myth. And so, the real mystery isn't where the giants went, but why we continue to look for them. We look for them because we sense, on some deep instinctual level, that their story is our own. We are drawn to their power, their tragedy, and their fall because we see a reflection of our own species' journey and our own uncertain future. The search for giants is, in the end, a search for ourselves, for the lost parts of our history, the untamed corners of our minds, and the immense, terrifying, and wondrous potential of what it means to be human. The giants are gone, but their shadow looms large, reminding us not of what we were,